Hi, this is Renee from A Human Workplace, the host of To Work with Love. This is the podcast series that makes the case for putting love at the center of work. I'm a social scientist, and in 7 years of research interviews, I've discovered how a more loving and human workplace is better for people, for teams, and for their results too. By cultivating a loving way of working, everyone has the opportunity to belong and to contribute, and for meaningful work and thriving. Now, by thriving, I mean moving away from wasteful, frustrating, harmful operations and adopting workplace practices that feature courage, clarity, wholeness, spaciousness, simplicity, and hope, and all of those grounded in love instead of fear. Now, over the last several months in this series, we've talked about courage, clarity, and wholeness. And today, I'm going to talk with you about the three other factors: spaciousness, simplicity, and hope. These are all interconnected in my life right now, and rather than talking about them one by one, I wanted to just bring them all together. Now, here's the big idea. If we love our team members, then we want them to thrive and not suffer or languish. But consider this: if we're overwhelmed, if we're under extreme pressure, it's really hard to thrive. If there's just too much to do and it's all too complex, if we have no margin or extra room in our day, it's hard to thrive. If we feel mentally crowded or if we're physically crowded, if we can go from one thing to the next without pausing, if we have to go, from thing to thing without pausing, then say it with me, it is hard to thrive. If we're experiencing all that, we are probably stressed and afraid and sad and maybe even hopeless. And while there are lots of tactics, if you will, that we can use to de-escalate that stress and counteract all this harm, those are really only temporary solutions. Eventually, we've got to get to the root of the problem, and that's really what this work is all about. Getting to the root of the problem means creating a work experience that's more balanced and healthy, with challenge, but rest too, and with times of intense production, sure, but also with room to reflect on what we did, with motivating deadlines, because who doesn't love a good deadline, but with celebration. It's great to be busy, but we also, frankly, we need more boredom and slack time. Now, in today's world of work, no matter what the field, the pressure to compete and prove yourself can be all-consuming. And so for me to even talk about slack time can seem sort of offensive, perhaps. If you have downtime or rest, you may be worried that you seem like you're not a team player or that you're disappointing people or jeopardizing your job security. And that's why it's so important for leaders to set the bar for healthy balance, to create guardrails, if you will, for your team members, to advocate for room for them to be healthy and balanced, and for everyone to commit together to supporting everyone else's well-being. If we're going to sustain our work, we can't keep it up at peak intensity all the time. If you think about it, even machines can't do that. Engines require maintenance. Farmland lies fallow. Computers need to reboot, for heaven's sake. So why would we humans be any different? If we're going to perform well and sustain the results that we really want, which of course, we do, we're in our positions, we're in our organizations to deliver on something. But if we're going to sustain that, we need to make room. And this means creating the spaciousness to pause and reflect and play and even be idle. We need to simplify our work and cut down on overwhelming complexity and quantity. And in doing this, we can find hope. Hope that work can be reasonable and that life can be meaningful. Hope that it all can be enjoyable again. Now, this spring, I have been making some major adjustments for more spaciousness, simplicity, and hope personally. If I were to give this season of my life a title, it would be Love Your Life Again. I confess that I can actually too easily take on way too much. And suddenly I find myself miserable and not really even being me anymore. It's sort of like living someone else's life. And so I've been reclaiming my life again with some spaciousness, simplicity, and hope. And I want to describe to you a little bit about what I've been doing in real practical terms in hopes that you'll relate to that. And maybe if you're struggling in these areas, these can be some examples of just what I mean. So in terms of spaciousness, I have done the first obvious thing. I've reconfigured my calendar to prioritize what's really core to me. And I've kind of put on a slow roll what is less important. There's some things that I'm not stopping altogether, but they certainly don't have to be like urgent and crammed into a week. I can just like take my time with some of those things. And I have cut out completely what is just not aligned. So this means I've made more time for writing and reflecting and connecting to myself. And I've ended up eating better and moving more and getting out in nature. I'm also prioritizing my relationships, caring for my family and spending time with friends and colleagues too, because I have wonderful relationships with my colleagues. I was really grateful with all of this spaciousness this last spring to be able to be with my son in the hospital for 2 weeks. He had an unexpected illness, and I needed to be there for him, and this spaciousness allowed for that. And then I was similarly grateful to be able to be the doula at the birth of my daughter's first child and to care for her for 2 weeks as she recovered. And in a few weeks, wish me luck, we're hosting Grandma Camp with a bunch of the grandkids descending here. And so this spaciousness allows me to do this with peace, without anxiety. Another way I've created spaciousness is to reconfigure my physical space to be more open and less cramped. I'd sort of had things kind of crammed into my office and things configured in a particular way that just was really not very open and flowing. And I redid that space. The other thing I did was I cleared off a table that was holding stacks and stacks of stuff that really weren't useful. Got rid of all that. And you know what I pulled out? My art supplies, and I have them all laid out so that I can use them anytime. And I've done charcoal drawings and oil pastels and some watercolor, and it brings me joy. It releases something in my mind and in my soul too that helps me to think and be calm and kind of draws forth creativity in other parts of my life. So the other thing that I did was to clear off my whiteboard. Now, I have been using this huge whiteboard that I have here in my office as essentially a massive Kanban board. I was trained in lean and continuous improvement many years ago, and I have been a Kanban board user for years. And I'm basically a Kanban board believer, but it had kind of gotten out of hand. And if people saw my Kanban board, they were like, it was like a wall of stickies, and they were sort of overwhelmed and worried about me. So I took it all down. I just took it all down and actually made just a bunch of like to-do lists, which is sort of anathema to anyone who's trained in lean and continuous improvement and Kanban. But I did. I took it all down, made a bunch of to-do lists that were things I didn't want to lose track of, let go of a bunch of other things, like just got rid of a bunch of those items. And now I have this giant whiteboard that's open and available for thinking again. I love it. So that's creating some spaciousness. Now, what about simplicity? As people, we tend to add and add and add, and rarely to subtract. I mean, after all, more is better, right? Wrong. We have these to-do lists, which I just mentioned, but we probably need some stop doing lists. We don't often prune old ideas or take things away, but we just keep piling on more and more. This is the message of a book called Subtract by Lady Klotz, which I really want to recommend to you. It will help challenge you in how you think about problem solving and maybe help you find balance as well. And along these same lines, I was talking to my friend Moshe Engelberg recently, and he challenged me with this. What he did was he reminded me of the 3 Hindu gods, Brahma the creator, Vishnu the preserver, and Shiva the destroyer. And he asked me this really provocative question. Which of these powers, Renée, do you identify with? When are you comfortable exercising? Well, I said, creating and preserving for sure, but not so much destroying. And then he said this, he challenged me that in this moment, some destroyer energy might be useful. Maybe there are some things I could stop doing or take away or end. Okay. I could really feel the discomfort of that challenge, which I loved. I just had to notice how foreign it felt to me to think about destroying. I mean, after all, creation was super familiar. I love creating. I'm a creative. I told you I got my art supplies out, right? And preserving is something I've learned to do in my life, especially in my role as a mom and wife and grandmom. I've spent a lot of energy on sustaining life in really practical ways, preserving food and preserving memories and traditions and relationships. Heck, I've kept 4 children alive and grown them into adulthood. And so I identify with preserving the well-being of my family through peace and care and balance. But destroy, that is new territory for me. At first glance, destruction seems violent, and perhaps it is, but what quickly becomes clear is that destruction makes room for new creation. And in fact, if I think about it, I have learned to end and to stop and to destroy when needed. And when I think back on those decisions in life, those were hard decisions, but those are the things that allowed me to create the life that I have today. It wouldn't be what it is now if I hadn't first destroyed some things. So I guess I do have destroyer energy and ability, and I can use it now in service of what needs to be created next. So all that to say that I'm reflecting on products and services and considering what's expanded and expanded and added and grown and become more complex and taken up so much room, and what might need to end to simplify and make room for what's most important. And all this whole process gives me so much hope. It gives me hope that I can have renewed, meaningful impact and do what I love and what I'm called to do with joy and frankly with fun too, without stress and overwhelm and complexity, without burnout and sadness, for heaven's sakes. And as much as it might feel passé to talk about the pandemic, I honestly believe that this process of pursuing and finding spaciousness, simplicity, and hope is a huge step of my recovery from the trauma of starting a business on March 3rd of 2020. No kidding. It was set up months in advance, and there it was. And then I found myself leading, a team and an organization and a business at the very beginning of the pandemic and through those early years. And I made a bunch of decisions at that time to adapt and cope. And what I'm just realizing recently is that can be re-examined. There was so much urgency at that time to push, to expand, and to pack things in and to frantically try to figure out how to take action. But what I know is that all that can be reconsidered now with spaciousness. I can take a breath, maybe destroy, so that I can create and preserve what's most important to me. So why am I sharing this? Because I don't think I'm the only one still recovering. I don't think I'm the only one who's found herself struggling under a crushing weight of something she's built that no longer serves. I don't think I'm the only one feeling exhausted and overwhelmed and hopeless. I think many people are. Perhaps you are. And if that is you, then I'd invite you to consider how you can create more spaciousness, simplicity, and hope for yourself. And as a leader, how you can help your team to find more of those qualities too. Ultimately, to bring it all around, this urge is about love. It's the urge to love your own life. It's the urge to love your team members and their lives too. And these urges are right on. This urge for spaciousness, simplicity, and hope is a tangible way to show your love to yourself and to others. It says, I honor and respect you, your life, your family, your community. And I do the same for myself, right? There's a translation by John Miller of the Japanese characters for respect for people. The characters in Japanese that stand for respect for people. And his translation is holding precious what it is to be human. Holding precious what it is to be human. So if I love and hold your humanity as precious, as worthy, and in the highest regard, then I want to create a more loving workplace for you, one that's characterized by spaciousness, simplicity, and hope. And I applied the same standard to my own life and work as a leader too. And this helps us to work with love. Thank you for listening today. If this episode was helpful to you, please let us know. I'd love to hear from you personally. You can email me at renee@makeworkmorehuman.com or connect with me on LinkedIn at Renée Smith A Human Workplace. And please share this episode with a colleague and give us a shout out on social media. Together we can amplify this message and put love at the center of work. You can find previous episodes of our podcast series or learn more about how to create a loving workplace at our website at makeworkmorehuman.com. boredom.com. And until next time, trust your instincts to be loving and human because it's time to work with love.